100% of people change what they're doing in their life based on pain. I used to think it was not 100%. It's 100%. Every person I get on the phone with, every conversation I have, I'm just assessing, are you in enough pain at this point where you're willing to actually do something about it? Or are you just interested in not feeling the pain that you're in right now, that you'll just kind of move a couple inches away from the fire? And I think most people spend a lot of time doing that, just moving an inch or two away from the fire. And it's like, okay, I did enough that my wife's not going to file divorce papers. But then a year later, it's like, yeah, but the marriage still isn't where you want it to be.
So this is awesome. So just a quick intro, who you are, what you do, and then we'll see where the hell this thing goes.
Okay, cool. Yeah. So my story, basically, small town Nebraska kid, family of 82% divorce rate. My parents, my aunts, uncles, pretty much everybody but my grandparents got divorced. I didn't want to do that, but I ended up doing that. So
nobody goes into marriage going like, I give this thing 1 year. Right. So grandparents. I interrupted
Go
you.
ahead.
I've noticed how we've shifted over the decades of different generations at how my grandparents were together. Like crazy stories. They stayed together through it all.
Yep.
And then my parents divorced. And then, so you saw that in Nebraska as well. 82% divorce rate in your family, you said?
Yeah. So I went back and I was like, okay. And my first wife, she was bipolar. I didn't know that at the time. So I kind of found myself in a minefield I didn't know how to navigate. And then she cheated on me. There's kind of a whole story there. But ultimately, it's like, when I look back on it, I take responsibility for the fact of like what I got myself into and not being able to properly navigate it. But as I was going through divorce and like talking to my family, and they're like, yeah, she, it's basically she's the problem.
Victim.
And so even being able to be like, I can't even talk to my family and be supported in trying to be like a co-parent, because they just want to be like, well, her, and I told you shouldn't. And so
you have kids?
Well, we had one kid.
Okay.
So we had a kid. A year later, we got married, thinking that'd be,
that fixes everything.
That fixes it. And then a year later, we moved, thinking that would make things better. Man. And it's like, dude, it doesn't matter wherever you are. There you go. And it's just like nothing. And so we got to Colorado. We were in Kansas City, and was just like, spent a year in an apartment. She had a miscarriage. Obviously, we were still having sex, but it was just like, hey, this isn't meant to be. It's actually probably, we can go down this rabbit hole, but like, I didn't really have a belief in God at the time.
Okay.
And she had 2 miscarriages while we were together and our one daughter. And I remember sitting at my kitchen table being like, I think God's trying to give me a sign that this isn't working, and this is not the path I'm supposed to be on.
So you didn't have a belief in God before, and then, because typically it's the opposite.
Correct.
Typically it's when great things happen, then it's like, okay, this is a sign. You're thinking, shit's falling apart. Maybe this is God telling me
Correct.
a different, okay.
Like I grew up,
intriguing.
I went to church as a kid and like had, kind of religion in the family, but I didn't have that like, oh, I have a belief in God. I go to church, Jesus, but I was like, man, I don't know. This isn't working out, but I feel like God's trying to tap on my shoulder and be like, hey, buddy, stop banging your head against the wall.
Well, you mentioned something interesting. You said church Jesus, which a lot of people, so I grew up in the church, and so I've gotten to know the church Jesus. I've lived most of my life outside of the church, so I know Jesus is Jesus, and then we've had family and friends, and being in my industry, known a lot of people. There's a different Jesus that is down, spending time with people in prison, and it's completely different. So it's interesting how we create these different understandings of a being or an entity.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and that's what my wife was raised Catholic. That's like a whole other path. Basically, I looked at my family and I said, like, I love you, but like, you guys can't support me in the direction that I want to go. I want to have a healthy marriage, and nobody in my family does. Like, I followed the family plan. I wasn't really proud to like have the Wendell last name. I had some, cousins in a small town. It's like I had some cousins knock up girls in high school, and just like, I just didn't want anything of it.
Okay.
And so it was, and at the time that I got divorced, my parents had been separated 15 years or so. and I'd talked to my dad maybe 5 times in 15 years.
Okay.
So I had given him the Heisman and basically was like, hey, I don't want to talk to you. I don't want you to be part of my life. And all of this stuff just kind of like came to a head for me.
Do you mind sharing what led to that?
Yeah, for sure. So my parents ran a business together, and to me, I always thought like, hey, like life was fine up until 13 when they got divorced. What I realized is he wasn't necessarily really present in those younger years either. I spent a lot of time with my grandparents, mom, employees, secretary, whatever, and so they sold the business. He had different plans than what my mom wanted to do. He basically, like, he's driven to go create another business and go put together this, like, massive farming operation. And my mom's like, hey, you just, like, sold all this business. We've been 25 years building this business. Like, my sister was just going off to college. I was in high school. It's like, can we just not jump on to the next thing? He had to jump onto the next thing. And the next thing also included another woman that she found out about. And so basically the day after Christmas, 1999, day after Christmas, he leaves in his like little Cessna airplane to go about 2 hours away to where his farm was and never comes back.
Wow.
And my mom waited until like that night to be like, I'm like, hey, like, where's dad? Is he okay? And she's just like broke down. She's like, yeah, he's not coming back. And so that was like how I found out.
And how old were you then?
So I would have been 13.
That's a lot for a 13-year-old.
Yeah.
Trying to navigate, well, puberty, getting all these different emotions, but also like the number one figure in males' lives is their father figure. Yeah. So he just dips.
He dips. He ended up coming back, you know, like a week later to kind of talk about things. But at that point, it was just like, that was like a moment where I was like, screw you.
Yeah.
You know, and at 13, it's like you've got that kind of FU energy anyway, right? It's like, oh, I know better. I know this. Like, how could you do that? So I was like, screw you. We had a couple of conversations. We did like one visitation. But at that point, you know, in the divorce court, it's like I was old enough to essentially get a representation and be like, I don't want to go see my dad. I don't want to do visitations. Yeah. And they honored it. For better or for worse.
So how did you cope? Because most turn to sports, a mentor, drugs, alcohol.
Yeah, it's drugs, alcohol, and you know, basically women, right? And for me, that's where like what it meant to be a man. And I will ask guys this, like, hey, when you were a teenager, it's like, what did it mean to be a man, right? You could drive, you had sex, you were getting into like, you know, partying. And for me being in like small town Nebraska, I mean, I would hang out with the 18, 20, 25-year-olds. Like, it wasn't hard to get, especially alcohol.
I just got a picture of Matthew McConaughey. All right. I keep getting older and they stay the same age.
Exactly, right? So there were
rural towns.
There were a handful of like those type of dudes around. And so it's just like, well, that's what it means to be cool. Like, they're old, they're, you know, it's like, cool, like, let's go drink. So yeah, it was a lot of that. You know, drinking definitely every weekend, drinking at you know, lunch during school. You know, it's like, let's go chug a couple of beers and then go back to wood shop class and run the buzzsaw.
What could go wrong?
Yeah, right? And like really get the adrenaline and dopamine pumping. And, you know, I look at my mom and it's like my mom was devastated going through divorce. And it's like she couldn't discipline me. There was no like grounding. There was no, hey, you're not going to do that. It was kind of like.
Yeah, once you're at that age, the more I read about parenting and different things, it's like you got to do all the parenting early, especially as a single mother, because once they start getting older, it's like there's no authority. And that's something I didn't understand before. Yeah. So you were just kind of running wild, just trying to be a man.
Yeah, trying to be a man, trying to figure it out. And a lot of it was just off of this like FU energy to my dad, right? And it was just like, he's not, and so as much as I didn't want to be like my cousins, again, I was following very much in the same footsteps, and I'm like, well, I just, you know, I don't know, I'll find out. Whatever girl I get pregnant's the one I'll be with. Like some of this stuff now, I think about like what my actions indicated that I actually believed. And I'm like, that is a really horrible plan for life.
Isn't it intriguing though? I mean, I look at it and we're trying to raise our kids a little differently, but it's like, okay, when you are arguably the most unhealthy in life is when you find your forever person, and then you figure out if you two are going to work through all the shit that life throws at you. Yeah. So that's intriguing. So okay, so you had your proximity plan basically of, well, what everyone else does, I'll do.
Yeah, exactly. And it was just like, you can't tell me any better. I'm gonna, whatever. I'm doing this. I've got it all figured out. And that really ran me into my 20s. I got arrested half dozen times for drinking underage, minor in possession, right? So you're out at different events and parties and the local county fair, and getting popped by the cops. Went to college. The pattern really just continued. And I think I ended up, fortunately, I had a couple of buddies who, had some serious DUIs, which will really get your attention. I think I had 2 DUIs at the time as well, but they were underage. So it was like, I crossed, like I at 21, I had quite a long list of alcohol-related offenses, and it's not that I stopped, but I at least started, like I was more focused on my career. Like I had got into corporate America, and I was like, okay, I'm going to go climb the corporate ladder thing, which again was just getting out of small town, take over the family business, take over the family farm. I wanted nothing to do with that, and so I'm like, all right, I'm going to go climb the corporate ladder. But even inside of corporate, I found people doing, sharing Percocets and pills and going to happy hours, and, it's like, hey, the tab's on the company. And, I found myself in some situations that were pretty embarrassing. I'm like, wow, you don't have yourself in check, and you're with your coworkers, like kind of acting a fool. But you tend to find, you find people that are like you. So it's like, oh, these couple of people at work, they smoke weed and we drink and we kind of go do our own thing. And it's like birds of a feather flock together. So you can always find your crew. Yeah.
And when in it, it's so easy to rationalize how it's not that big of a deal, or you're different. So how long were you in corporate America climbing that ladder?
Yeah. So it started in Kansas City. Became a father, we got married, and then left Kansas City, moved to another company, but kind of adjacent industries. And that took me up until, really like 2019.
Okay.
So mid 30s. I was doing the thing. I was climbing. I was doing interviews with our CEO and our executives, and like really finding out like, hey, what does leadership look like? And at the time, I had equated leadership to more money, basically, right? If I'm honest about it.
Most people do.
And so I'm like, okay, how do I get into leadership? How do I do, more? And I was just the guy kind of pushing the envelope. And so there was a couple of positions that were created for me, like things that my teenage self would have been like very proud of.
You did it.
You did it, dude. Look what you did. And you're doing this, and you got the perfect position, and you hit your salary numbers. And I was like, this like
unfulfilled.
This is it. And during that time, so I went through divorce, got into personal development, and I knew the first seminar I went to, I think a lot of people have kind of an awakening or awareness, and they're like, I want to help other people, or I want to tell other people. But there was just something about the kind of the initial event that I went to that I was like I see myself up on that stage one day.
So what was your first, I'll call it personal development drug?
What do you mean? Like seminar, book, like that?
What was the very first thing you went to and went, what is this?
Yeah, so it was like a 2.5, 3 day like weekend long seminar.
Okay.
And the way I got into it, interesting little side tangent, is I had a friend who invited me. She said, hey, meet me at this Holiday Inn tonight at like 6:30. And I'm like, okay, single, didn't have my daughter. I'm like, all right, whatever. I'll go show up at this thing. And she was attempting to connect me with some other woman who was like in this personal development group, like a leadership group. And I don't know how much you know about the industry, but it's like the more you go up, the more enrolling others is involved and all this stuff, right? So
I've seen some pyramids in my time.
Yeah. So I kind of walked into a trap. But I listened to the presentation. I heard the statistics about, basically between age 0 and 5, your brain, your identity is like 50% developed. It's another 30% by the time you're age 12. So basically by the time you're a teenager, like 80% of who you think you are and how you think the world works is formed. And then another 15% as a teenager. And it's like, that's all I needed to hear to be like, okay, there's something here that I don't know. And I signed up, and I don't know, probably 2 weeks later or whatever it was, I was in the seminar, and just like mind blown open. And then of course it was from this one to the next one to the next one. And it was helpful. Like I found a lot of community. I found a lot of things. And if you've experienced this, it's like the longer I kind of hung around, there's a community that forms. I'm like, wait a minute, like if you guys have been through like all the classes and like you speak all the lingo, but life kind of largely like looks the same. Like it wasn't true for everybody. There were definitely people that took it and ran with it, but I started to see that like, oh, there's kind of a community and kind of a group of people that just hang around and validate themselves by the learning and the classes, which caused me to, at least distance myself from some of that and just find, other ways and look at it more of like intentional development. Like I realized I needed like an intentional development plan for myself, not just, hey, what's the next seminar that this person is encouraged to put me through.
Well, and I'm glad you talk about this because this really gets into human psychologies. What do you think the difference is between those that stay in the circle for kind of this self-edifying gratification portion of it feels good to I'm actually now purposefully designing a life that I am excited to live every day and there's no finish line?
Yeah. So I think part of it is because of our education system and the way that we view education is like we have been programmed, most of us, to think it's like the more you earn, the more you learn, the more you earn, right? The more education I have, the better off I am. And so I think there's aspects of the industry that just play into that with kind of different clothes. And maybe not even necessarily intentional, but it's, hey, we're here to educate you, we're here to give you an experience. And I think a lot of people mistake the fact that if they're going to the seminar, if they're doing the thing, if they can speak the language, that somehow that translates to different results. I think the other thing is people, you likely see this, that 100% of people change what they're doing in their life based on pain. I used to think it was not 100%, it's 100%. Every person I get on the phone with, every conversation I have, I'm just assessing, are you in enough pain at this point where you're willing to actually do something about it? Or are you just interested in not feeling the pain that you're in right now, that you'll just kind of move a couple inches away from the fire? And I think most people spend a lot of time doing that, just moving an inch or two away from the fire. And it's like, okay, I did enough that my wife's not going to file divorce papers. But then a year later, it's like, yeah, but the marriage still isn't where you want it to be, right? Or I did enough to break whatever addiction, but then it finds its way back into my life or whatever that is. So I think a lot of people do that. And I wish there was a shortcut or, I'm like, I tell people, I'm like, hey, if there was a magic pill, I would just be selling you that. But at some point, like, there has to be something that cracks open for you where you actually catch a vision and go, okay, I'm going to head somewhere else other than just a little bit away from my current circumstance.
I love the picture you painted of I'm in so much pain, but what I can do is I can move just a few inches to the side and now the pain is manageable. We call it comfort in the chaos here. And what's interesting is I spent probably the first 10 to 15 years fighting it. I'm like, oh, it's got to be different, until I'm like, okay, this is how human nature is. So interventions are fascinating because all it is bringing a false bottom in and basically an ultimatum of stating, if you continue, here's additional pain that will happen. But if you get help, all this other pain doesn't need to happen. And it works for some people. Others it doesn't. Some move the 2 inches and go, okay, I surrender. One of the best... I don't even know, you know the author Chuck Palahniuk? Brilliant. He wrote Fight Club and a few other books.
Okay.
But one of the most brilliant, to me, it's the epitome of addiction. It's the scene, you seen Fight Club?
Yeah.
It's the scene where they're fighting in Lou's tavern. Lou comes down and Brad Pitt is like, Lou, we need this. Like, please let us stay here. And Lou's like, you don't know who I am. Get out of here. And he starts beating the crap out of Pitt. And like the moment he starts bleeding, he goes, okay, we'll leave. The moment the pain disappears, I lost it. And we will sit there getting pummeled by life, marriage, whatever it is. When it gets painful, okay. And then as soon as that shift is, they'll go right back to the old pattern. So you started to see this intuitively.
And I think one of the thing, I think the other thing is you're saying that clicked for me. Well, I don't know that I would say that I seen it intuitively. I would say that I spent a lot of money educating myself and then still being frustrated that there weren't like Like small changes, but not like, man, I'm not really seeing this, like living a very different life.
You're like, I just sat in the pit of pain and just kept feeling it till finally I'm like, I got to do something else, which is kind of what happens to most of us, sitting in the pit of shit, right?
Yeah, and I think when I draw this out for guys, I basically show, hey, your life is here at point A, and you want to get somewhere else at point B, and we just pick a time frame. I was at point A today, and I got to point B, the later today. But I pick a time frame of 12 months and go, okay, where are we headed 12 months from now? This has been the most effective way for me to kind of look at it and see it for myself. And most people don't necessarily have a problem saying, yes, I want something different. Yes, I want this better. They can struggle on like what the specificity is, but most people can kind of tell you, all right, here's a few things that I want different. The challenge is we chart off on that course, and ultimately we end up hitting what I just call resistance. Stephen Pressfield talks about resistance in terms of like a writer and an author. And so it's like we end up encountering resistance, and oftentimes we just start drifting, and basically we do kind of a loop, and that loop can be 6 months, 12 months, etc. But we end up kind of just looping back around, pretending that we're doing things different. But if we take an honest assessment of our life again, we go, oh crap, I'm back. And so I would say for my wife and I mean, probably 2 years of getting to the end of running out an annual plan, getting to the end of the year, looking at our annual plan, looking at our results and being like, hey, we took this great trip and we did this and we had some great things. But if we look in certain areas, financially, physically, some of these areas, we did a lot of stuff, but are we really down the path, or did we just kind of do a big circle? And if we were honest, there was kind of a two-year period there where it was like, we're just kind of looping with nicer clothes on.
We upgraded the wardrobe, so now we're miserable in cloth.
Exactly. And so I think for me, it was really being able to see that. And then I think the other thing was recognizing there is like a gravity to life that will pull you back and pull you back down. And I couldn't, like when I got into business, I couldn't understand, like I didn't have massive financial goals. I was like, hey, I want to get out of corporate. I want to be able to do this. I want to replace my income. I've seen other people doing this. I want to work online. Like it was all nice things. And I'm like, I'm not trying to 10X anything, right? Once I got into business and realized like, oh, wow, if you don't have a big vision and a strong direction you're headed, you will pull back and you will slide back. And I think for like a lot of guys that I work with, if they're not business owners that haven't experienced that, there is a comfort of, hey, the paycheck comes every couple of weeks. This happens, my wife still shows up. She's taking care of the kids. You just get kind of numbed out to the way things are. And again, you'll move a little bit, but not actually see it. And so for me, I would say it was also having objective results in my life in terms of like, hey, what did you produce in business? What's the number on the scale of your, body weight and body fat, and what's going on with your blood work and all of these other things that it's like, I can no longer hide and kind of confuse myself on whether or not I'm making real change here.
So you leave corporate America.
Yep.
Did you have in mind what you wanted to pursue?
Okay, so I left corporate. At the time I was selling some stuff online and learning digital marketing, pyramid, multi-level marketing, supplements, like getting into that game, and that's really where my first money came from. I had the idea of like, wow, this can be a full-time income, but there was something about it that just never, like based on results, it just didn't fully align for me to be like, yeah, I'm going to go all in on this. I ended up working, basically doing tech consulting. So essentially what I was doing in corporate America, not under the corporate America flag though, and working with a couple people that I had met along the way. And so I had some more like freedom and flexibility, but largely the same skill set, right? And that allowed me to just start to go, okay, I can take on this project. I can do this. I don't always have to have an every 2 week, paycheck coming. And one of the organizations, you probably know, Garrett White, Wake Up Warrior, right? I was a member there since 2019, and I got an email one day that said, hey, we're hiring for an internal sales team. And I was like kind of in this place of, all right, I'm doing tech consulting. My wife and I were doing some stuff online. We had started a podcast about relationships. We were very passionate about relationships. We were only a few years into marriage at that time, and we were getting people that were 10, 15 years in marriage looking for coaching, looking for support. Yeah. And so we're like, we're going to be marriage coaches. And we did that like for probably 6 months. And we were like, we're not qualified to do this. We can help you. And we definitely help some people, but it was like, we don't feel like we have a solid foundation to build on here.
Yeah.
We pivoted. My wife worked with some women. I was doing more of the back end. So we were always in like the relationship realm, but we were just kind of finding our way through like, how's this going to work out for us?
Most people don't recognize that, though, and that's one thing that I respect as you're sharing that is I find a lot of people will get into something because they've done it for a little while, but they've never like really gone through it. Like I love it because I actually went to school for business, and then you find out your professors have never run businesses, and you're learning the things that textbook-wise should work out, but it's like Mike Tyson, right? It's like when you get in the ring of business, you get punched in the face, the textbook stuff often doesn't work, or you think it's supposed to and it doesn't. You get frustrated because you're doing it how you're supposed to.
Yep.
A lot of people don't take a step back to self-assess to say, maybe this isn't what we are supposed to do at this point because of qualification. That takes a lot to recognize that.
Yeah, and that was kind of in that period of like a 2-year, the 2-year loops of like, and it really feels like we're pushing a rock up a hill. Like I know business, I didn't expect it to be easy, but it was like just so much friction. And we're like, wait a minute, if we are passionate about relationships and helping people with relationships, and running a business about relationships is having an impact on our relationship, that doesn't add up. And so about that time, email came, hey, we're hiring for an internal team. And I said, you know what? And at this point I had a relationship with Jesus, not church Jesus, but my version of, relationship that found me in a hotel conference room. And I just said, hey, like if this is what's supposed to be, I'll make my 3-minute video, I'll submit it. And within a couple of weeks, I got hired in on that internal team. And what I realized through that process for me as a man, like I was also using my wife as a shield a little bit because she was the face of our business, and I had all the justifications. She was on SiriusXM. She was a DJ on SiriusXM for like 20 years. So she had a pretty large social media following, way bigger than mine. She was a great communicator. She had gone through this journey of being single up until she was 40, and then we got married. And so all of the pieces like fit together of like, yeah, you should go talk to women about relationships.
Sounds like it makes sense when you look at it. It's like business decision, and also most men would prefer looking at a woman, and most women feel less off-put of looking at a woman for relational than a man. Yeah. So it sounds legit.
On paper, it was all like, hey, but again, we're like, this isn't working, and we're not going to continue. We're not going to be those people because, I mean, I'm sure you've seen that being in the industry, online marketing, network marketing, coaching, it's like there are people that have an image front side and a different life backside, and we're like, we're not going to do that. We're not interested in that. Like if we can't be transparent and this can't be all of us, then we're not going to do that because that's just a lot to maintain, and that's an integrity issue. Like we're not doing that. So anyway, that transition point with Warrior came. We really just kind of ramped down everything that she was doing. Couldn't immediately stop, but it's like, hey, we're no longer launching programs. We're ending this community. We're bringing things to a close. And I went and worked inside of Warrior, and I thought, hey, if I'm going to run a legitimate coaching business, it seems like the best way for me to fast track that is to go on the inside of one of the largest, at least that I knew of, 8-figure coaching business, one that I had spent thousands of dollars with. Let's go see how this thing works. And that's what I did for about 18 months. And they transitioned their business model and kind of everything that they were doing from, they thought they wanted to build a large sales team and continue to serve clients at a high level. And when I was on the inside, that transitioned into, hey, we have more of a B2B offer, and we want to go certify coaches, and we want coaches, we're going to license our frameworks and do this. And so I'm like, well, okay, God, like clearly that's why you placed me here and given me the experience from the inside. And now I'm in this first group of certified coaches. I don't put really any stock in coaching certifications because, again, I've been around it. And it's really just kind of a high ticket offer to somebody else to slap their name on your back. But I was like, okay. And again, certified coach doesn't mean successful business. Doesn't mean like, oh, hey guys, let me show you my certification and you're going to give me money. And so that was, it was about 3 years ago that I launched out of there and realized that even though I had certification, even though I had experience, even though I had frameworks, I had to really learn to just make it my own and find the people that I was called to lead and really look at, hey, what do I actually believe based on my journey, not just what's convenient and what fits in this box, and really adapt to what do I stand for, which has ultimately been this idea of family leadership, and it seems to be, at least for my generation, the millennials, something that most of us were not taught, and something that a lot of guys are like, they hear the message and they're like, you're right, my wife tells me I'm not leading our family. I want to lead my family. I don't really even know what that means. And I'm like, great, you've come to the right place.
Yeah, it's interesting because I know a lot of my friends, very few, their parents are still married, but most were raised primarily by mom.
Yeah.
And so when we're raised by our mother primarily, we find out what it's like to be loved unconditionally. No matter what I do, I can perform and get love, or I can not perform and still get the same love.
Yeah.
And so it's interesting seeing the lack of masculinity in raising young men and the effect it has on the back end now when they get married.
Yeah.
So you felt this calling, you kind of went through it yourself. So how did that turn into what you do now?
Yeah, so originally it was warm network of people that I was like, hey, I'm going to offer additional coaching of kind of what you're already used to with the organization you've been in, and again, that was my first year that like got me going. And then as I worked with the men that I worked with, and I'm like, what are the real problems that they actually have? And again, just looked at my own journey, and then continuously coming back and going, okay, what's the most efficient path to get a man from this point to this point, right? It's like you see it over and over and over again, and that's also the nature of coaching, which is like you give money to an expert or a guru, and you assume like, hey, they've really thought this through and they've got it all figured out. And again, for me, it's like I was doing the best I could with what I had, but I realized like if I'm gonna really obsess over this person that I'm serving, which for me is essentially a man late 30s into his 40s, 2 kids, married roughly 10 years, successful at career, kind of struggling at home, but not necessarily like I want to go to therapy. Or maybe, hey, my wife and I have been to therapy, that didn't really work for us, and so a lot of these guys just feel like who am I to complain? I was on a call yesterday with one of my guys, and he's like, dude, like things are going great. My wife continues to like tell me, and I appreciate you leading and all this stuff. He's like, but there's these kind of these issues that we're still kind of stumbling over. And I'm like, okay, and I'm like, also recognize that. Because I've been married for 20 years, this has been going on for a long time, and you're kind of a couple months into just really confronting things that need to be confronted. It's going to take a little bit of time, right? It's going to take some time to work through that. But for me, I really looked at what are the commonalities of the issues here, and somebody that's been married long enough to know that they don't like they have a level of pain, and it's not just going to go away. They've considered divorce, but they don't really they don't want to get divorced. Everything else is going great. It would divide up their assets. It would destroy their kids, all of that. And I've just looked at that and designed, hey, how do I take you from that kind of chaotic state into a more empowered state of leadership so that you can continue to build on that with the frameworks. And for me, I talk about a family operating system. And back to your point of, being raised by our mothers, me too, right? Raised by my mother. I think we're from a generation where it's like, hey, dad's traveled for work. Dad's spent long days at the office. Like there's a lot of reasons why we were raised the way we were. I look at it now and I go, I had the good fortune to realize that my family plan didn't work early on in life. But the reality is for most people, their family plan isn't working for them. Like it's not the 80s and 90s anymore. our kids are dealing with things from technology to suicide to addiction to the information they're exposed to the pressures of society to, hey, you might not ever have to work again because of AI. Like there's a whole combination of things that none of us have ever actually lived through. And so for me, like I look at it and I go, you don't have to be as screwed up as I was, right? You don't have to reach that floor as deep as I did to actually be intentional about how you're designing your family and how you're leading your family.
So what are some of the common pitfalls you're seeing with this newer generation that are coming into parenting and, like you said, the ideal avatar, 10 years into marriage? What are you seeing are some of the common issues?
Yeah, so I think one is the idea that, like, as a man, just providing financially for your family doesn't cut it anymore. And I think a lot of guys are like, hey, I provide, I do this, I do all of these things, and it's not enough, and they feel somewhat disenfranchised. I don't necessarily think that's a bad thing. I think we are living through an evolution where most of us and most of the men I work with, like, they're not wondering where their next meal comes from. Like financially, they're taken care of. Whereas just a couple generations ago, maybe not our parents, but our grandparents, the purpose of marriage and family was survival. Like dad had to be out working, dad had to be out earning the money, mom was at home with the kid, for the majority of kind of the family dynamic. And I think, for better or for worse, that led to men being able to be abusive to their wives and women not being able to get out of situations that were maybe dangerous. So I think there's like an awakening that has happened primarily actually in women, but I think in both genders that has just led to different expectations in marriage. And I think a lot of guys, like, they didn't get the memo on that. Right? They're just kind of like, hey, this isn't like I thought it was going to be. I think the other thing is there's a statistic that millennial fathers are spending 30% more time with their kids than their father spent with them. So if you think about work from home, what happened, COVID, a lot of my clients are like, they have businesses or careers and have designed their life and their schedule to actually spend more time with their kids. But then they're like, this is hard, spending more. It would actually be easier just to disappear to an office for 40, 50, 60 hours a week than to juggle this dynamic of work and money, and then also being home, whether you're working at home or you're just spending more time at home. And so I think life is really kind of blending together a lot more than it used to be. And I think the other thing is we've allowed the polarity, the happy wife, happy life, don't be toxic masculinity for men just to say, well, I'm gonna take a back seat and I'm gonna let her lead. But it's my belief there is a divine design to man and woman and how the family works. And so
since the dawn of existence,
there's all of these kind of like everything's fluid and blended together, and people have really lost their roles and they feel like, oh, we don't want to have a traditional family, right? There's this whole like traditional family thing. And it's like, it doesn't have to look like your grandparents' family did in traditional. But owning those masculine and feminine and those roles is actually what makes things work better.
Yeah, and it's interesting, as you're bringing this up, one of the things that we've seen a lot of, especially in our industry, as just the males, as they start getting back in the workforce, they're building back the trust, the different things, they find it hard to connect with the kids. And one of the reasons why that we found is because there's so many needs met at a high level that are measurable when it comes to work and performance, especially for the we'll call it masculine energy. Yeah. And what's interesting is it's like, why do I feel like working more and I'm actually getting more in return, and I find it so difficult being with the kids? And it's like, because it's almost impossible to measure the feelings of being with the kid versus I hit this benchmark, now I get bonused out at this. And so I'm glad you said it. It's not just of helping people heal to get back to the workforce and to add value to the world. It's how do you become holistically healed in all aspects.
Yeah.
And you mentioned not just health and fitness, but also with family, with connection, spirituality.
Yep.
So it sounds like you help an individual for their family really become whole again, if that makes sense.
Yeah, we base it off of basically four aspects of their life. So it's their mind, their money, what they're doing, work, purpose, skills, their body, right, physicality, like simple things. The amount of guys that I'm like, you would feel better if you take a 20-minute walk every day and go to bed at the same time and wake up at the same time. Like, just start there, and probably drink more water. Like basic stuff, right? And for me, that I've kind of just normalized, but that was part of my journey of like, hey, actually taking care of myself. And I think we, again, that's kind of an outdated masculine thing where it's like beer and pizza and like, I'm just going to destroy my body. And we don't really, we think about like body and self-care as like more of a female thing. And it's like, I'm not saying you need makeup and, like face cream and all this other stuff, but like actually taking care of the one vessel that you have.
Yeah.
Family relationships. So, obviously marriage with the wife. I believe the more you're connected and aligned with your wife, the better off your parenting's going to go. Yeah. The other pitfall I see is a lot of guys go, I can't figure out how to make it work with this woman that I've had kids with. We're not going to get divorced. In fact, we're just going to be kind of miserable roommates with each other, but I'm going to go pour all my energy into being the best dad I can. And they try to get what they actually need from their wife and that connection from their kids. Puts a lot of pressure on their kids, puts a lot of just disconnect between them and their wife. And so to me, that's a big pitfall, is putting dad before husband.
So you're seeing that on the male side, because we see that often with the female side of, well, my kids will love me, so I'll pour more into my kids, versus start addressing some of the things with the husband.
Yeah, no, I see it with guys as well.
Okay.
And it's just because the thing is, like, if you think about the societal narrative, everybady's going to give you a hand clap for, oh, you're such a good dad. Oh, you're really trying to be a good dad, right? But we almost expect that, hey, marriage is hard. But fewer people really care, like, hey, are you a good husband or not? It'd be very common to go sit around with your buddies at, have a drink or not drink or whatever, but be very acceptable to sit around with your buddies and talk about how your wife's this and the conflict and she's that, and everybody kind of agree and chime in, at least in typical circles. But if you sat around and, it's like, man, I really hate my kids and I can't, it's kind of like, whoa, man, like those are your kids. So there is a little bit of just like, you get the golf clap from doing your best to be a good dad. And I think there's an idea that if I'm a good dad, either one, she will see me that way and appreciate me, which is not the case. There's a whole attraction thing there that doesn't work. Or they just go, I don't know what to do with this woman, so the time and energy I have, I'm going to pour into my kids, because that seems like the right thing to do. The other dynamic that's very clear is then your family of origin. So I distinguish between family of origin, where we came from, and family of creation. And I think a lot of, again, this generation men that I work with are highly influenced by their family of origin. Your marriage should look this way. You should be doing that, right? Expectations, men in their 30s and 40s that I'm like, you're still concerned about what your mom thinks of you, your grandmother, or your father, this. And I was too. Like, that was part of my journey.
It's imprinted into our DNA for survival.
Yeah. And my wife and I really got a front row seat to this in the last this will be the fourth year. We moved her parents in with us almost 4 years ago. Oh, wow. And so when I met her, she was like, my parents have always taken care of me. She had kind of a rough patch in her early 30s where she ended up moving back home. And she's like, it's important to me that I'm able to take care of my parents as they age, whatever that looks like. And I'm like, cool, I got you. I love you. My dad used to say, once I reconnected with my dad would say, family's kind of like fish. You got to throw it out after 3 days. So I was like, my family's not coming to live with us. That's clear. They're very close. It's something that I really admired. But that's brought a whole host of challenges.
Yeah, right when you shared that, my first thought was, how does that change the marriage aspect of husband and wife having the in-laws living under the same roof?
Yeah. So I, back to kind of me doing this and God being very clear, like, hey, I'm like, oh, okay, my life is a laboratory for kind of all of these facets of what's going on. In the beginning, it was awesome. It's new. They're there, we're having dinners together, we're spending a lot of time together, and then it's like anything, it's like the new wears off.
Well, the interesting thing is that's just more Western culture where it's odd. Eastern culture, it's accepted like everywhere in the world outside of America.
Yeah.
Like even Central America, even Mexico, a lot of family, even different surnames will live together. And so it's always intriguing because I'm Westernized, so my mind goes like, oh, how? So new and shiny, beautiful, wonderful. You got the built-in babysitter for date night.
Yeah.
And then
kind of.
And then the shiny smell, the new smell starts wearing off.
Yeah, and it's like they've had some health challenges, and so even the like built-in babysitter, like we'll get a babysitter because it's just like at least at this point, like our kids are a lot. So we're like, hey, we'd rather you enjoy your time as grandma and grandpa when you want that versus feel an obligation of like, hey, because you're living here, we're going out. So, but it's definitely helped. It's.
I was gonna say the part that came up. Have you pulled this line yet? As long as you live under my roof.
haven't done that. It is a weird dynamic though to be the youngest adult in my house because my wife's older than me. But the leader of the home, right? And so I'm in this dynamic, and very much my in-laws look to me as like, hey, you're the man of the house.
You're the patriarch, basically.
You're the man of the house. And my father-in-law had 2 daughters, so it's like that last name is not carrying on. And I look at him and I say, hey, I think here's a man who's he's tired of running his race. Right? Physical pain, body issues, a lot of things like that like he doesn't have the same energy and the desire to go and lead and let's do, and that's totally cool. That was part of them moving in. My wife and I actually talked about this just the other night on date night. Is it brought a lot of things to the forefront for her to confront about her childhood. And so whereas I went through it, going through my divorce, reconnecting with my dad, and kind of like pushing on, hey, who's my family of origin? Her parents have been married almost 60 years now. When we met, she was like, my parents are basically the model of marriage. They're happy together. They've been married, all of these things that it's like, hey, under our roof, once you see somebody day to day and the dynamics, you go, well, wait a minute, this might be a little different than the story you had in your head. Yeah. And it really started to bubble some things up. The other interesting thing that we've learned, and my wife and I have worked with the same family therapist for the last like 6 or 7 years, and she's just like, she keeps trying to fire us, and she's like, "You sure you want to keep talking to us?" You see, we're like, "Yeah, no, this is helpful. Once a month, it's good to like check in and talk about what's going on." But she warned us. She was like, this is going to be challenging, and there are going to be times where you're going to have to make a choice between your parents and your children. And we've had those. Hey, there's a medical emergency that they have, or, not like deathly, but we're going to go to this doctor's appointment, or we need to go to urgent care, or we need to do something. And it's like, okay, and the kids need to be picked up from school, and I've got something going on for work. And it's like, we can't all be everywhere at the same time. So it's created some challenges. I view it through the lens of it's a net positive experience. And that's my encouragement for, when I work with guys and they may have tension with their in-laws or their different family dynamics, and I look at it and I go, if it's a net positive experience and we can weigh out the pros and the cons, and you say, hey, the pros do outweigh the cons, well, then sure, you can complain about it, but like, to me, it's like if it's a net positive experience, like figure out how to file your complaints away like pretty quickly, because otherwise you're complaining about something that you actually would say, I do enjoy it as well. And that creates a lot of dissonance in your mind. So just view it for what it is, which is a net positive experience.
Yeah, it's interesting. I've heard this pop up a few times. They say if you're complaining about something and you don't change it, you are now choosing to live in this lifestyle of complaint.
Yeah.
So it's much easier to either change the behavior or to accept what it is that you have, because it creates this duality of I'm going to complain, saying I want something different, but not take the actions to make it different. So there's that loop we're talking about.
Yep. Yeah, and it's easy to say, well, I would expect. I think that the learning lesson for me has been we had, I think, more aspirations for them and what their latter years could look like than they did, specifically around health. You're moving to Colorado, great weather most of the year, be super active. We're in a neighborhood. We're in a neighborhood that's been developed in the last like 5 years. So it's like nobody's necessarily from there. Everybody has moved there. There's a mix of a lot of families and older folks, and they've got the Boomers Club that plays, cards on Tuesday at 9. And we're like, look at all these things that you could do. And they're not necessarily all the things that they want to do, and they're not necessarily as active. And so we had to taper our expectations from you could do this and you could do this and you should take this supplement and go see this specialist and do all these things to basically go, hey, like what do you want? Like you want to sit here in the recliner for 8 hours a day and listen to what's going on in the world? Like totally cool. Like we'll support you with that. Like not my agenda, whatever whatever you guys want. And it's easier for me than my wife because they're not my parents.
Yeah.
But we've definitely had to kind of shift to just a posture of, we're actually here to support you and we'll help you any way that we can, but we're not here to put an agenda on
and
you.
that's so tough. There's a book, Byron Katie, called Loving What Is.
Mm-hmm. I read that shortly after my divorce.
Okay. It's intriguing of how do I love what is, great title, without pushing my agenda, but really loving it and not just doing it to say I do. Mm-hmm. But so as you were sharing, this actually thought pop up, and I want to take it selfishly as a learning experience. Of it's like you get to look into the future of having your in-laws living with you from what you've been seeing, because you've said it's been how long now?
About 4 years.
4 years?
Yeah, this will be our 4th year.
What have you changed in doing different for yourself, knowing that you're going to be that age?
Yeah, so I mean, health is a big thing. Which I heard something, I don't remember where I heard this, but the saying was the health of your 70s and 80s is dictated by how you take care of yourself in your 40s and 50s. And so I'm like, noted, and I can see, again, my father-in-law, this is very common for, pretty much every man from my family. I watched my grandfather sit in a recliner for 10 years before he, went off the earth. I watched my stepdad kind of do the same thing. He retired from coaching football and teaching high school to sitting in the recliner and going to doctor's appointments and a bunch of just, this shoulder and this knee and this thing. And so my father-in-law's had a number of surgeries and things, but shoulders and knees and joints, as long as I've known him for the last decade, he's been like, oh man, I should probably get this replaced. I really need to do this. And now it really is at a point where it's kind of too late. Yeah. Right. And so I think for me, the one proactive nature of health, I think the second piece is, if something does need to be addressed, like address it. I had heard something from a guy who's he's a pilot. I don't know if you know much about aviation, but in aviation, they do preventative maintenance, and they'll say, hey, this part's got 10,000 hours. We're going to replace it at 10,000 hours. And he was making a case for there could be a possibility in the medical system to say, hey, we know that knees last about this long or this many miles and shoulders, and that the more proactive you actually are about replacing some of these things that wear out in the body, the better off you are because you replace it in good health and your recovery is a much shorter time. So I kind of got bought in. I'm not going out and replacing perfectly good knees,
Okay, so I got my knees done last year and my shoulders done.
But I took that as, hey, as soon as there's a sign that something's breaking down and not working, better off to do it sooner than later. And I think there's a mindset of, let me see how long. It's like, let me see how many miles I can get on these tires. And it's like, we know that the tires are going to need to be replaced. Do you really want to push it to kind of the edge? Yeah,
that's a great analogy, too, of the plane versus the car, because I know driving, there's preventive maintenance, but I'm like, I can get a few more 1,000 miles out. And then once it goes out, you're like, okay, you just call, AAA comes, fixes it. But when you're up in the air, and if you live that way, you can't wait for AAA. And so I've never heard it compared to the body that way. I'm like, I really like that of the preventativeness, because that's a huge thing. I'll speak for myself. I take my body for granted, abuse the hell out of it. Just did my first Ironman last year, a one and done. People are like, oh, you can do more. I'm like, no, it was on my life list, but I'm like, I've never realized how much I've just abused and taken my body for granted. And as we start facing mortality a little bit more, it's kind of like, I'm going to start living a little bit different. Yeah. So what are some of the things that you've changed from the health standpoint?
For me, like the way I eat, paying attention to my body. So again, I grew up in Nebraska. It's like, potatoes, gravy, cheese on everything, just stuff like that.
Comfort food.
Yeah,
Oh,
exactly.
Sounds good.
And I enjoy cooking. I'm a pretty good cook, and I had kind of rationalized like, hey, as long as I'm getting enough protein and this, and I also grew up, to talk about addictions. Like I realized like I'm a sugar addict. Like, it's a coping mechanism. It's a thing that again is easily like justifiable, but I really had to look at that. My mother-in-law to a degree, like she definitely likes her sugar as well. And so it's been a battle where like she moved, it's like an addict. You move in and we're like, hey, we like share the same stash, right?
Yeah.
Oh, you're running to the store and it's like, okay, cool. It works for a period of time. And then I see my, middle daughter really, and her brain chemistry kind of works the same way mine does. And I see her sneaking through cabinets and getting stuff. And so it's like this multi-generational kind of look at things is just like a box of mirrors that I'm like, okay, this is no longer like, oh, you should cut this out. I'm basically like standing by to like train the next generation to deal with a problem that I haven't dealt with. And so better education around it, talking to our kids, hey, this is protein, this is carbs, this is a fat, this is sugar, this is why we limit these things. Like, but I had to get educated. Right. Yeah. Not just like, oh, meat, potato, like kind of know that. So I would say that. I think the other thing that I've seen from them is it gets lonely the older you get. And you're at that age, or they're at that age where it's like, one, they left where they've always lived on the East Coast and don't have that same friend circle and neighborhood. But two, half or more of those people that were in their friend circle in their old neighborhood are no longer here anymore. And it's challenging. They've got a church environment and they've worked to make friends and kind of get into things, but it gets harder at that age. And I heard this a while ago, which is it's a good idea to have friends that are older than you. It's a good idea to have friends that are your age, and it's a good idea to have friends that are younger than you. And so for me, I've always back to the kind of, Western Nebraska, hanging out with the 25-year-olds that would buy me booze in high school. Like I've always just kind of hung around the older crowd. And I'm like, it's cool. It's great. And for like, I've benefited a lot of that, a lot of wisdom, a lot of guys that have spoken to me, a lot of guys that have, 10, 15 years down the road ahead of me that can help. And I never really related to, kind of the younger or the next generation. And just in the last couple of years, I've had more people, early 30s, mid 20s that have come into my life for one reason or another. And I'm like, hey, you know what? I'm gonna foster that relationship. Like I think there's something it's not that I just learn from people older with more experience. I think I can learn something from this person with a different perspective. And so I've seen that as well, which is don't get so stuck in just kind of my immediate circle, because the older we get, that immediate circle starts to fade for multiple reasons.
Yeah, and I think it's important too to actually have either friends or conversations or read books that challenge your aspects. Like right now, I'm not in the whole woo-woo thing, but I'm reading a book off of recommendation by Dr. Gerber called Vibrational Medicine.
Okay.
It's very intriguing. I'm doing my best to listen full non-biased of kind of like, okay, it kind of sounds like a quack, but some of the stuff they're saying, and it's all backed by studies, but I'm like, wow, there's so much that the old me, well, still the current me, but hopefully a little less, but the old me would shut down back. I don't agree with that, so I'm shutting it down, versus let me be open to this. Doesn't mean I have to agree with it or all of it, but to continually learn and expand. And I think that's one thing, I mean, kind of coming full circle, we're talking about our grandparents. They were able to have conversations and see things differently. Yeah. And even call people by the wrong names. Yep. And nowadays it's like everybody wants their side justified. And if you challenge it, it's like, get out of here, you're ignorant. Like you talked about toxic masculinity. I'm kind of like, how do we have conversations and to be able to sit in total opposition of each other with respect? It's crazy.
I think the internet has, and just the expansion kind of society, I think there's a benefit to the fact that we can go, there's a Facebook group for any sort of niche and market. And there's, I mean, in my neighborhood of 3,000 people, there's 6 different Facebook groups of like the main community group, and here's the moms group, and here's the dads group, and here's the hikers group, and here's the bikers group. And it's like the internet's given us that ability to have those segments, but it's also created the flip side that you're talking about, which is like, if I don't like it, then it's bad, you're wrong, and I'm going to go over here and justify my opinion versus go, hey, like, okay, it's like there's family members that won't talk to each other over who they voted for. Mm-hmm. Right. And I've got a little bit of that. And I don't take politics that serious, but I've got a little bit of that in my family. And I'm like, I don't have anything, like, you can be upset about it. To me, it's all like political theater. Like, let's just talk about it. Let's talk about the headlines. Let's talk about what's going on. Like, I don't necessarily think it makes I can't draw that like direct conclusion from the White House into my life right now. So can we just like have a conversation and kind of talk about it for what it is? And it's like, they're very much not a possibility. And I'm like, okay, we're family. And the other thing I'll say, man, is, I said this the other day and somebody's like, well, that's kind of sad. And I'm like, sometimes family is just the people we grew up with. And, and it's like, I have what I would consider a good relationship with my mom and sister that are 2 left in my family of origin. We don't talk that much. Like, I make it a point to hang out with my sister once a year. We take a summer trip together. I'm very intentional about like, hey, let's spend time together. She's got a daughter. I've got our kids. But we don't have a lot of the same interests. Like, we're not trying to pretend that we do, and it's like, we love and support each other. But I think there's kind of another kind of false narrative that it's like, hey, because they're your family, you should stick together. You should respect your elders. And to me, I'm like, if it works for you, right, and it's aligned with where you're headed in life, but don't let it like completely derail you in the life that you feel like you're called for and what you're doing and what you're creating, which is why I distinguish family of origin versus family of creation.
Yeah.
Because I see a lot of people like even 50s and 60s that are kind of miserable until their parents die, and then it's like, oh, thank God Aunt Nancy's gone, or Grandma so-and-so's gone, or my mother's passed. Now I feel like I can live my life, and it's like I don't subscribe to that.
Yeah, well, we could dive really deep into that. It sounds like a lot of times people don't confront certain issues and wait for it to naturally resolve via death. I remember I saw, maybe it was 3 or 4 years ago. It was an old timer, and he said, one of the saddest things is the most important relationship in your life changes one day all of a sudden. And I'm like, that's interesting. So I kept watching, and he's talking about siblings. And he goes, you're best friends, you share life experience, you're together, and then one day you move out, and that all of a sudden just loses. And I'll never forget this. Actually, I called my sister, and I said, I never, like, we were close growing up. We're only 22 months apart.
Okay. It's like my kids, yeah.
Yeah, and I'm like, I said, I never realized this until now. I said, would you be up for it? Because I said, we were the biggest part of each other's lives. I mean, when you go through divorce together, when you go through all the stuff, all the trauma, we really helped each other survive a lot of stuff. And we had great childhoods. Like when I share that, people are like, oh, so terrible childhood. I'm like, compared to most, no, actually, it was really good, but there's still trauma. We all have trauma.
Yep.
And so it's probably been about 3 years. I remember calling her because she's in Tahoe, I was telling you. Mm-hmm. I said, I don't think I've ever grieved the loss of our relationship, of what it was. I said, would you be up for doing a weekly call?
Yeah.
We still, to this day, which I told her I'd be a few minutes short because of this.
Yeah, no, you're like, hey, I talked to her at noon, yeah.
When we set that up.
How many years has that been?
It's probably been 3 since we've been back on again.
Okay.
But it's amazing of rekindling that friendship, but as adults and as parents, and it's been wonderful. And so that was one thing that wasn't even on my radar until watching one old timer share about how this relationship changes, and then making the ultimate intentional decision to say, I value this relationship. I want to continue. And so now we travel together once or twice a year, a lot of stuff, but it's been beautiful. But let's do this. So I want to ask one question.
Okay.
All this wisdom that you've garnished working with your clients, what is the impact that you hope to have either on family, on clients?
Yep.
Like what's the message you want to leave?
Yeah. So to me, I think that you can design your family and be intentional about your life, and that your kids, they need you. They need you healthy. and they need you whole. And I look at it as passing the generational baton. Like my wife and I, we talked about, hey, should we have more kids? Maybe we should adopt. It's like once we have 3 and we're like, hey, we're kind of enjoying this parenting thing now that we're out of diapers. Should we do it more? And our conversation was really like, I think we're going to have an impact on more kids and more families by the work that we're doing. And I envision a group of 10,000 families that are all like designing their own operating system and like living by certain codes and just their own way of being and their traditions, that we get the opportunity to go take trips and host events and do cool things and kind of like family summer trip. And just that we become a place where it's like, hey, we know that we're all living our own lives, but we can get together and we speak similar languages. Kind of like the event that I met you at, where it's like we all come from different places, but we get together and we have a common thread. And that's really what I want to see with families.
That's awesome. So if someone's wanting to design their family, how do they find more information about you?
So Instagram, at Tanner.Wendell on Instagram, and then FamilyLeader.co. I'm putting a playbook up there for specifically for men. I have women reach out to me. I get comments of like, well, why don't you have this for women? Or what about women? And I'm like, I'm not a woman. I can only...
Nor do I plan on doing a transformation.
I can only speak from my experience, but it's like, hey, I get women that reach out. I get women that reference their husbands. But yeah, find me on Instagram, message me there, or FamilyLeader.co, download the playbook.
That's awesome, man. Thank you for coming in.
You bet, man. Thanks for
Appreciate
having
it.
me.
You got it.